This is our Milwaukee Memory Oral History Project. My name is Edward Mooney.
I'm Simon Langhoff.
My name is Lucas O'Brien.
And this is Mr. Brian Cummings. This is being recorded at the Cudahy Country Club Bar in Cudahy, Wisconsin on December 11th, 2023. So could you tell us where and when you were born?
I was born March 16th, 1965 at West Dallas Memorial Hospital.
Can you describe the neighborhood that you grew up in?
I grew up in a neighborhood right off of Highway 100 and Palatine, Beloit Road and Oklahoma. It was a small little cul-de-sac with about 15 houses. And then we had a bigger apartment complex on one side and then a lot of construction on the other side.
Do you think that Greenfield was a good place to grow up?
Yes, it was great. We had a great time. We went to Whitnall High School and it was perfect.
What about it was perfect? What made
Well,
it?
you know,
perfect?
we came from a large family, so I had 7 brothers and sisters, and there was a lot of neighbors that were very close in age. The kids were close in age, and all of us hung out together.
So when you hung out, what would you do?
Basketball, football, bike riding, kick the can was a big hit when we were younger. We played basketball virtually every day. My dad would say that was the only reason that in the winter that the driveway was shoveled, because we played basketball that much. So
yeah. When you were younger, I know you were raised Catholic. What churches did you go to, or what sort of role did religion play?
We went to St. Mary's Catholic Church in Hales Corners. We also went to St. Matthias Church in West Dallas. It was West Dallas, Milwaukee area on 92nd and Beloit. We grew up Catholic. We had 7 brothers and sisters. We did make it to church a lot on Sundays, but we did. It was a part of our growing up.
Would you say it became an important part of your life because of going to church when you were younger, or?
I think I really think that it was a matter of just because we had so many kids and it was just hard.
Mm-hmm.
But we did go to church when we could, and it was probably once or twice a month. I think it's a big impact growing up of what your beliefs are and how you conduct yourself as a child.
So in your neighborhood, when kids in their free time would play sports, what would adults do when they had free time?
My father was a teacher, and he also worked a couple jobs all my life. So my father was always either working or at home, sleeping, because he was working so much. My mother was a stay-at-home mom. She also worked. We laugh because a lot of us didn't even know she was working when she was working, because she worked nights, and then she'd come home and we're like, "Mom's sleeping. Why is she sleeping so much?" But it was because she was working a job at night.
What did your parents do for work?
My father was a teacher at Whitnall High School for many years. He also worked for Godfrey Trucking, and he also ran a rec program, a summer rec program, and a basketball program for kids.
Mm-hmm. And what did your mom do?
My mom was a stay-at-home mom. She, and I said she worked at the telephone company, and she took care of other kids. So like I said, we had a lot of kids in the neighborhood growing up. So my mom would take care of kids, babysit. So there was always plenty of kids at the house.
Mm-hmm. Where did you go to elementary school?
Jefferson Elementary. I don't believe it's any longer. I think it might be a church now. But that was also off of Beloit. I believe it was on Cole. I'm not quite sure what the road is now, but I went through till 5th grade, and then I went to Whitnall Middle School from 5th grade to 8th grade.
What were your middle school years like?
Great, because like I said, growing up with so many kids, sports were big in my life when I was younger. I always think that was one of the reasons why I didn't get into much trouble, because of always being out for sports, and you had to keep, you kept it busy. So a lot of basketball, a lot of baseball, a lot of softball, a lot of football. So.
Are there any fun or interesting stories that you remember from when you were in sports or middle school or elementary school?
There was a lot of fun times. I just remember growing up, my brother John was a few years older than us, and when we'd all get together and, like I said, shovel and this was winter too, we'd shovel the driveway and then play basketball for hours, and then the neighbor kids would come up and we'd play basketball, and we'd have a rotation of playing basketball all the time. And I had 5 sisters, and my sisters were pretty good basketball players also, so we played a lot of basketball in the winter and a lot of football and baseball in the summer. We had a fairly decent sized yard, so the kids from the neighborhood always played at our house. So there were in the summer football games, for, basketball, baseball.
So where did you go to high school?
Well, I went to high school at Whitnall High School, and I played football there, basketball there, and track. So I was, yeah.
Did you, or when you were in high school, what was it like going to the same high school that your dad taught at?
It was okay. He was the first one to know if I ever got in any kind of trouble. They pretty much let him know. I always was very happy if I had to go to the principal's office instead of going to my dad's room.
Yeah.
But it worked out fine. It was they get a lot of pros and cons where a lot of he's a teacher, so there's a lot of kids that didn't like him. So then to get a little harassed for that, but for the most part, all the kids liked him. So.
Did you ever get sent to the principal's office?
Yes, I have. Yes, maybe once or twice. Usually to my dad's room, like I said.
Yeah.
And that was not. Then it was no fun.
So the area that you grew up, what was the mood in that area?
The area where I grew up.
Yeah, Greenfield area.
Yeah. It was the mood or the setting. It was the area was a lot of very blue collar, and a lot of people that worked downtown or out in Waukesha kind of lived in that area because it was close to the expressway, and so people, the people that worked or lived in the neighborhood, the parents were all blue collar workers, and it was they either worked at Pabst or Laddish, that is right down the road, or some of the other factories that were in Milwaukee.
Could you tell us more what it was like when they still had the big breweries and stuff in Milwaukee?
Well, in Milwaukee, you had Miller, you had Pabst, you had Schlitz, and I mean it was a pretty big beer booming town. My father was a great athlete, and so when he was teaching and going to college at UWM, he also played for the brewery teams, or all the. So when I was growing up, obviously baseball was getting big and everything else, and Major League Baseball. But my father, when he was young, he played for Miller, and he also played for the Continental Can, and it was big. My father had a tryout for the Cardinals, and he didn't make it, but he was unsure of doing it because he worked for the brewery and played for the brewery, and made more money.
Mhm.
So, and then he became a teacher after he graduated at UWM.
Did most of the breweries around Milwaukee have different sports teams?
Oh, yes.
Or did they have like
It
games
was-
that you went and watched, or?
Well, it was bigger. I was a little too young to go, but my older brother was the bat boy, and he played when my father was playing for Continental Can, and they would go all over the country
Mhm.
and play. So it was kind of neat. You know, my brother would always talk about that, and it was fond memories of playing or being the bat boy and watching my father play baseball.
So these breweries were bigger than just like a workplace.
Yes, it was pretty much it was definitely part of the neighborhood.
Yeah, would you say the communities were sort of surrounded by the breweries?
Well, you know, if you look at it now, even you have Miller, who has the Valley, and there's subdivisions right by Miller Park, or not Miller Park, the Miller Brewery, and those the majority of those people that lived there worked at Miller.
Mm-hmm.
Actually, same thing with Cudahy. You had Patrick Cudahy, the meat processing company, and you had Laddish and Bucyrus Erie, and the majority of the people in Cudahy and South Milwaukee worked at Laddish or Patrick Cudahy. Back then, people didn't commute as much as people commute now.
Yeah. Was Greenfield, did they have something that most people in Greenfield worked at, or was that more mixed?
You know, it's funny, we always use a kind of, it was more of where the actual, we would tease, because it was more of like where, it's where the suburbia started, you know?
Mhm.
And so it was the strip malls, it was the, all the car dealerships along Highway 100.
Uh-huh.
So it wasn't really built up like factory style.
Did that area ever go through any kind of struggles or hardships?
I think, you know, I think back then, I think more of the struggles were just as a family more so than actual struggles like in that time frame, you know. We grew up, like I said, we had 8 kids in our family. My father was a teacher. Wasn't like we had a lot of money, and I mean, we wouldn't have known it, you know. We were young kids, so you didn't know. So, but growing up, you know, we had our own struggles as a family, financially and hardships. But big family, we persevered, and so.
When you were younger, do you have any memories of things that happened in Milwaukee that stick out as memorable to you?
Well, I was thinking back, Edward, when we were talking last time, and I believe it was 1987 when I was I was about 20 years old. The Brewers at Milwaukee County Park, you know, County Stadium, won 12 in a row. Easter Sunday, they won the 12th game, and that was very memorable. I just remember coming home from church, then taking my motorcycle down to the game and meeting a bunch of friends and grilling out. And the Brewers are on a 11-game winning streak, and that game they were down. I think it was like 6-4, or 4-1, and they came back and won 6-4. And we stood for the whole game, and it was just a super exciting game on Easter Sunday, and it was a beautiful day. So I think it was like in April, and I said I rode my motorcycle down to the park. So it was very memorable. And then they won the next day, I believe it was. They won the 13th game, and I don't know if you guys are familiar with George Webb's. They're still around, but they were like now Starbucks, where they were everywhere. But they gave away free burgers
Yeah.
for the 13th win, I believe it was.
How long did it take for Major League Baseball to get a foothold in Milwaukee?
After they left because it used to be the Braves. Then they left, and I want to say it was 1982 where the Brewers made it to the World Series. Then everybody in Milwaukee was a Brewers fan. I mean, I believe that was instrumental, like, for people to become real Brewers fans. I didn't know the Braves. I was too young as far as when they were in town. But the Brewers is really what everybody seems to talk about now, and that's what I grew up on. So,
would you say people sort of didn't accept or like didn't pay as much attention to the Brewers before they were in the World Series?
I think they were pretty good before that, and they had a lot of characters on their team that people would actually see around town and everything. So they became pretty popular pretty fast. So the Brewers did pretty well.
I know the Bucks won in 1971. Do you have any memories of that?
Well, I was 6 years old then. It was a huge. I believe they went in '74 to the playoffs, and then they had one of my favorite basketball players of all time, Oscar Robertson, played. And my father, who ran the rec program, we would go to the basketball games. So he would take a bus, and there'd be 25 to 35 kids going to a Bucks game.
Yeah.
And seeing Kareem Abdul-Jabbar, Oscar Roberts, and Brian Winters. I think no, it wasn't. Gosh, I can't think of what his name is now. I think it was Brian Winters. Bobby Dandridge. I mean, there were some great ball players. And to watch them for, I think it was like $6 to go to a game, and it was at the Mecca. So I think
Did you see the Mecca floor while it was there?
Yeah, and so it was. The Mecca was a place to go watch the Bucks, and it was a great facility, and it was pretty neat. The Bucks we went to a lot more Bucks games, I think, than even the Brewers when I was growing up, just because it was at that time it was pretty cheap or pretty cost effective.
Do you think that most people cared more about basketball than baseball at the time?
When I was younger, I think everybody cared. I mean, Milwaukee's a pretty good sports city, So, Milwaukee County Stadium. My fond memories are obviously Brewer games, but they're also fond memories of the Packer games. The Brett Favre played and won the last game that Milwaukee County Stadium had Packers play. So that was really neat, come from behind win. I think it was, I want to say it was Atlanta. And, so the Packers played 4 games a year at Milwaukee County Stadium. So that was very neat.
Did you ever go to any of those games?
I went to a lot of the games at Milwaukee County Stadium for the Packers. I had a friend that was in a wheelchair, and we could go to the games and sit in the box because it was a really neat and cool place to go watch a football game, even though there was a lot of obstruction and everything, but you knew it was going to be history. This wasn't going to be there. The Packers weren't going to play there long, so it was very neat.
Did you were living in Milwaukee when Marquette went to the championship?
Yeah, it was
1977, I believe.
77.
Do you remember that?
Yes, I actually. We were in the neighborhood. I was over at my friend's house, and we watched the game, and it was a great memory of just having fun and watching a game that was absolutely wonderful. Al McGuire coached the team. But it was 77, so I was 12 years old. So it was one of the most memorable times growing up of watching a sporting event at home. you know. So it was neat. It was a lot of fun.
So where did you go to college?
I did not go to college. I went to MATC for printing. I was in the printing industry for a few years, but I did not go to college.
Why did you choose to go into the printing industry?
Well, back then I was in the product of the 80s, so right then factories were starting to shut down in Milwaukee more so. So it was hard to get a job, and I was into the printing. I worked at Deluxe check printers my junior and senior year of high school, so I would go there and work from 6 until noon, and then I'd go to school, and then I went to school at night for a couple of credits also.
So how did Milwaukee, other than the shift away from industry, how else did Milwaukee change while that was going on?
Well, you can see the resurgence too, where probably in the late 80s, people were moving out of Milwaukee just for jobs and, out into the suburbs. But now it seems like a lot of people are starting to move back to Milwaukee.
Mm-hmm.
There's no factories or anything, but, IT, and a lot of people work from home, so they want to be where things are going on. So.
Yeah. If the industries weren't as much leaving Milwaukee, do you think you would have gone more into some sort of industry in Milwaukee than into printing?
No, I was always fascinated by printing, but obviously now everything's digital and things like that. But like I said, I worked at Deluxe check printers when I was in high school, and then I worked at W.A. Krieger, and then they changed names, and it was Renier America, and then they closed, and then I went to the Milwaukee Journal for a little while, and then I went over to W.A. Krieger out in Menominee Falls. So I was probably worked in the printing industry probably maybe the first, I would say, 15 years of my life,
What parts of the city did you live in when you were?
Well, I lived down on the east side off of Locust Street for probably about a year, but I also lived in Muskego and West Allis, and now I live in St. Francis.
Mm-hmm.
So it's really close to downtown Milwaukee. Take the Hone Bridge, and it's 7 minutes away, so it's really great. You can still get the feel of Milwaukee, but you're right on the cuffs of Milwaukee.
So those first 2 years out of high school and working in the printing industry, what would you do for your free time?
Back then, I had a motorcycle at the time, and so I would ride my motorcycle. I was still into bicycling and things like that. So I'd go to the parks, and obviously Bradford Beach was big. If you didn't have a lot of money, you go to Bradford Beach and spend the whole day in the summer down there, and then the park systems in Milwaukee are pretty great. So you could hang out at the park and bike or run or play frisbee in all the parks.
What were the things that people did at Bradford Beach?
Yeah, hanging out. There was no volleyball courts. There was but hung out, swam. Just got some sun.
Mm-hmm.
You've mentioned your motorcycle a few times. How did you get into motorcycles?
I have two brothers, and so we all were interested in motorcycles and everything else. So we had motorcycles. I had motorcycles all the way until I was about 25,
Mm-hmm.
and then I just started riding my bicycle more everywhere. So I gave up the motorcycle and started, bought a car and just kind of trying to grow up a little bit, I guess.
Yeah. What would you say was the next step in your life after the printing industry?
Well, then I worked in the printing industry, and it was not nearly as lucrative as was when I started the printing industry. And I had a friend of mine, Slim. Slim McGuinn's. So he offered me a job over bartending at Slim McGuinn's on First in Florida. So I worked there for, 13 years. So that kind of was my transition to, I worked in the printing industry for about a year after I started at Slim's, and I worked there, like I said, I worked there for about 13 years.
Did you ever regret transferring out of the printing industry? Ever
You
wanna go
know,
back?
as I look back, I mean, I probably could have stuck it out, but I don't think I would have been making a decent living. Sorry about that.
No worries.
And where was I? And I transferred over, and then I've always wanted to get into the bar business, but you know, financially and whatnot, it wasn't in the cards for me. But then I started working for Slim, and I worked for Slim for, like I said, for 13 years, and I mean, he pretty much taught me everything I know about the bar business, so it worked out very well for me.
What would you do for him?
I managed and bartended, whatever he also did, had Irish Fest. He had a building at Irish Fest. He also had a building at State Fair, so I would help him with his catering, help him with his shuttles. He had a couple shuttles, the Slimazine, famously known. And so I worked there, and then I left there, started working at a couple other bars, and then there was an opportunity here, and then my wife and I, we bought the country club.
Backing up a little bit, you
Okay.
mentioned your Irish Fest and State Fair. Do you have any memories of working at those or going at those when you were younger?
Yeah, I mean, we were, you know, at that time I was in my 30s, and it was great. I mean, you go to Summerfest, you go to Irish Fest, you get to see your Irish music, you get to see the Irish dancers. It's really definitely put Milwaukee on the map for festivals. It's one of the better ones. You get to see, I was into Irish music, and it was a great setting, right on the lake, so you always had nice days. So.
Do you have any memories of State Fair?
State Fair was great. I only worked there a few years while Slim was working there. It's definitely grown and gotten so much better now. So from the time when I was there, probably, gosh, it had to be 20 years ago to now. State Fair is really a neat place to go. They have great music venue, and great food. So it's definitely something to check out.
How would you say it's different from what it was then versus today?
I just think the food's better. I think the drink's better. I think that there's more things to do. Obviously, you get to see the agricultural exhibits, the cows, the animals and everything. But it's gotten better. I mean, that's one thing. Obviously, you don't. I remember Indy cars used to race at State Fair. So that was something I truly missed. I was not a big race car buff, but we would definitely go to the Indy, I think it was the Indy 200. It was right after the Indy 500. So it would Indy cars, and it was pretty neat. We would sit inside, cook out on the inside of the track, cook out, watch the races, and that was really pretty neat. That's one thing I do miss about State Fair, not having the races anymore.
Those races would happen during State Fair?
Usually State Fair was in August, and I believe the Indy race were maybe like mid-June.
Okay.
So
let's circle back to your family. How many kids were in your family?
Well, we had 8 kids total. I have 7 brothers and sisters. 5 sisters and 2 brothers.
Mm-hmm.
And I have a set of twins in our family. And at the time that they were born, they were the largest twins on record in Milwaukee County, coming in at about 10 pounds each. So that was pretty neat. And they were my younger sisters, and then I had one other sister born shortly after the twins. So 5 sisters and 2 brothers.
What was it like growing up with such a big family?
It was great. I know a lot of people talk about like things they did outside the house, but we did a lot of, you know, my friends and people I hung out were my brothers and sisters, you know, so that, you know, that was pretty big. We definitely had, if you wanted to play basketball, you had enough people to play basketball. If you wanted to play football, you had enough people to play football, tag football, or back then it was still tackle football, and baseball, and whatever games you wanted to play, you had enough people to play with, you know, right in your own family. And my sister Kelly was a great athlete, and my older brothers were really good athletes too. So there was a good group of people to pull from for sports and hanging out.
So sports were a big thing in your family?
Oh, yes, my father was a big athlete. He had a full ride scholarship to Madison for boxing. Unfortunately, that was the same year that one of a boxer died in the ring in college boxing, and they regrouped and no longer had boxing as a sport in college.
Wow.
So yeah, he had a full ride scholarship there, but he also had a full ride scholarship to UW Milwaukee for baseball. So he decided to go to Milwaukee and get his teaching degree and play baseball.
Would you say boxing was a much bigger thing back then?
Yes. Oh my gosh, I fond memories of my father and I going to the Golden Gloves and Tough Man contests and at the Eagles Club. So that was definitely, my father was a pretty big fond memories of watching sports with him, boxing especially.
What?
So what else would your siblings do other than sports in your free time?
You know, with we would fight a lot, but that's normal. I think. I'm hoping it was, but no. My sisters were, you know, they were had their own friends, and my younger sisters and everybody. We'd all do our own things. I was very much into going to concerts, wanting to go to concerts all my younger adult life, and went to many concerts, and I really enjoyed that. I can't play a note or sing, but I definitely was big into concerts and everything else.
Could you tell us about some of the concerts you went to?
Well, yeah. I talk about to my daughters about going to County Stadium and seeing it was the World Series of Rock. Well, I was maybe a sophomore in high school. Foreigner, a bunch of heavy metal or rock and roll bands, but the one that comes to mind more than anything else is going to see Prince when I was like a sophomore in high school. The 1999 tour, but it was in 1980. I want to say it was 82, 1982, and I went and saw Prince at the Mecca, and it was with Morris Day and the Time and Vanity Six, and 2 other bands. But gosh, Prince, he was probably 20 years old, and his stage was something that I've never seen before, and the way he played on the stage. My friend Chris Carlton and I went, and so we're talking 1982. It was what they called, you know, obviously you have rap now, but Prince and Morris Day and the Time and Vanity Six were called funk. They called it funk music, or blues or Motown, but funk was kind of what they called it. But Prince was just unbelievable. The way he could play, the way he moved on the stage, and it was new to me. We drove down, like I said, we lived off of Highway 100, and we went to this concert, and we were seriously the only two white kids in the whole venue, and we had such a blast. First time I ever saw a cannon, like they would shoot out, at the Brewer games or the Bucks games, they shoot out T-shirts. When we were sitting in, we were about 10 rows from the stage, and we were sitting there, and all of a sudden these cannons were shooting out this clothing out, and so I put my hand up, I caught this clothing, I looked down, I'm like, it's a G-string underwear. I'm like, what am I gonna do with this? And the girl next to me was like, I want those, and I was like, here you go. And we were in the whole night. Everybody, we danced, everything was just fantastic. Prince was the headliner, so Morris Day and a Time, and it was definitely probably one of my top 10 concerts I've ever been to. And I'm still a Prince fan, and still a Morris Day fan, and it's pretty neat,
Was there a lot of concerts in Milwaukee?
There was a lot of concerts, a lot of great concerts. I've been fortunate enough to see a lot of great bands play. I saw Tom Petty down. I've seen Tom Petty a few times. I saw him at Alpine Valley, but one of my fondest memories with Tom Petty was I saw him at Summerfest. It was 100 degrees out, and he played for 3 hours. And he played the whole time, and I just remember, like, how can, obviously you saw Prince, and then years later, it's like, how can you ever top, this guy played his heart out, and he played for 3 hours, and just really was just fantastic, and it's great to see concerts. If you're a music buff, it's really neat to see.
What was Summerfest like back then?
Summerfest was great. It was more affordable. Kids were able to afford going there a little bit. I think a little bit more than now. But they still have the same, same music vibe, I guess. So a lot of bands I saw at Summerfest. Growing up and seeing bands that you loved growing up, or it's a great venue right in our backyard to see so many concerts. The Cult, Earth, Wind and Fire, just to name a few, Tom Petty, just to name a few, just in that little venue, Summerfest.
Were there any experiences from Summerfest that stood out to you?
I think that every single concert was exceptional. Like I said, I saw Dwight Yoakam, who was a country singer, and it was a torrential downpour, so he had to stop for about an hour, and probably 80% of the people left. So everybody moved up, and he, again, another great musician, played for 3 hours. And, until they told him that he had to stop playing, because it was after 11 or after 11:30 or whatever, and then he stopped playing. But he played, it's fantastic, it's right in our backyard, and that's kind of when you get older, I guess, how you say it, then you really know, wow, that was actually pretty cool, and I really feel like at the Pabst Theater, all the theaters, Turner Hall, all the theater venues in Milwaukee, I definitely would recommend going to see concerts, because one day you'll be talking like this, talking about concerts that you've seen, I saw, like I said, I saw Dwight Yoakam at Summerfest. That's probably what Tom Petty and Dwight Yoakam were probably the most prominent ones that I saw at Summerfest. Prince at the Mecca, and and County Stadium was the World Series of Rock. It's a bunch of rock and roll.
Yeah.
So.
Were you still? So you were working in the bar, starting to work in the bar industry while you're at this time, right?
Yes. Well, no. Actually,
Sure.
this was all before. I didn't get into the bar business until I was older. So, I had to be 30 years old then when I went into the bar business. So yeah, 28 years probably in the bar business. So, I was in the bar business. My first job in the bar business was at Slim McGuinn's on First in Florida. I was there about 13 years, managed, bartend at night, helped with the shuttles, ran the shuttles and helped with his catering, which included State Fair and Irish Fest.
Yeah.
And that's where I met your aunt.
Yeah. Could you tell us how you? met?
So Slim came up and said, "Hey, we're gonna have somebody bartend with you," and I didn't. It was a Friday night, and I normally didn't bartend with anybody else. I usually bartended by myself, and I was like, "Wow, am I getting totally old, or am I, I'm losing a step already?" And but anyways, Molly came in, and I knew Molly before this, and the people that came in to see her was like 20 to 30 people would come in and come and see her. Like, they would travel wherever Molly was working, where she was working at the Harp or Walski's. They would come and see her. So I was like, wow, this is pretty cool. So I think I asked her out that night, and then I helped her move. I helped her move some furniture, and then now the rest is history. 2 kids, and 20-some years later. So.
Was there any sort of rivalry between bars?
The rivalry, especially in Milwaukee, especially downtown Milwaukee, all the bar people were friends. So you would go and visit other people at other bars and vice versa. And it was a lot of people that were going to Marquette or going to UWM, and they bartended, part-time or on the side, while going to school. So there was no rival. It was more of a friendship among bars. Mm-hmm. But I think now, we kind of, that bar business has kind of lost that feel. But back then, I worked for Slim. I also worked at the Swinging Door, which was less than a mile away from me, away from Slim's. I worked at the Newport that was in Bayview. That actually, he was also from Slim's, so it was kind of neat too, where all the people that now own bars in Milwaukee used to work for Slim. So Slim was instrumental in having the bar business the way it is now. Actually, you have Casey and Shelley that own the Swinging Door, very popular bar in Milwaukee, the best bar food ever. And you had Frank that owns a Newport and a Foggy Dew, that are extremely awesome bars in Bayview, and he also worked for Slim. And then Molly and we opened up the Country Club 13 years ago in 2011. And there's a friend of mine, Jackson. He has a bar in California. So it's kind of amazing, a little bar or a bar in Milwaukee, and the people that left there and opened up other taverns and restaurants and bars is pretty unique.
How would you say it compared from working at Slim's or the Swinging Door? How would you say that they were different from each other?
At the point when I worked at the Swinging Door, I only worked 1 day a week. They had a catering company or a ballroom upstairs, so you had a lot of wedding crowd that would come down. But at Slim's, you had the restaurant, you had the catering, so it was pretty much all in one.
Mm-hmm.
So, and I worked there predominantly 6 days a week, and then I only worked at other places a couple days a week, you know. So it wasn't. I really think that they all have the Milwaukee charm, I should say, as far as in the bar industry. So.
What would you say makes a bar have the Milwaukee charm?
Bartenders that talk to you and actually, you know, you become friends with them. Kind of a weird statement. I think we have one, or enter as strangers, leave as friends. So it's kind of the way it goes in the bar business in Milwaukee. Everybody knows everybody. Everybody's friends with each other. So that's kind of the Milwaukee charm, I think.
Mm-hmm.
So those, did you say 13 years at Slim's?
Yeah, about
Did you-
13. Yeah.
Okay. Did you have any like fun experiences, interesting?
Well, yeah, we would. You know, the Slim's was very popular with the Bucks coaches. They would come in and eat lunch. So Coach Carl at the time and Rick Majerus were a couple of coaches that would come in. The rest of the coaching people would come in and eat lunch there. So that was really kind of neat. You would run into, I think Brett Favre's agent was also a former football player. I think it's like the bus cook. He would come in for dinner. A couple of Packer players would come in for dinner.
Yeah.
So yeah, those were good times.
Yeah, so when did you choose to move to St. Francis?
It was actually probably 30 years ago. Morris 22. Yeah, about and St. Francis. My alley is Milwaukee.
Mm-hmm.
So I mean, I always wanted to live in Milwaukee. I love Milwaukee. It's but we're a block, an alley away, and it was a duplex. So I rented out the upper and then lived in the lower. So it was great. I love the city life. Being able to get to places fairly easy, walking, on foot, and driving.
Is there something that drew you to coming to the south side of Milwaukee, St. Francis, Cudahy area?
Well, I always felt I was kind of a south side kid anyways, so I would always, when I was a kid, I would always ride my bicycle to the lakefront, Seven Bridges, which is in Cudahy, right on the lake. These are all county parks, so I always loved the south side of Milwaukee, where you could get to downtown Milwaukee really easily, and you could get around Milwaukee pretty quickly. That was what really drew me to the south side of Milwaukee.
Was there like a main catalyst which prompted the move?
No, I mean, at that time, I actually worked out in Menominee Falls, but I never wanted to live out in Menominee Falls. I always wanted to live in Milwaukee, in the south side, the Bayview area, and that was before Bayview is as popular as it is now.
Mm-hmm.
Why didn't you want to live in Menominee Falls?
Why didn't I?
Mm-hmm.
I'm kind of one of those people where I either want to be smack dab in the city or far out in the country where nobody is.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So that's kind of I've always thought of that way. Either I want to be around minimal amount of people, or smack dab in the city where nobody really cares what you're doing because they have too many other things to worry about.
So did you open the bar before or after you moved to?
No, okay, so
or you before. or after, what like drew you to open the bar?
Actually, so I was working. I left Slim's, and I started working at Roman's Pub, which was another bar and a craft beer bar. The Newport, which was a Bayview bar, and I worked for Frank, who's one of the greatest guys in the world. So I worked there for a couple of years, and I also worked for a company that fixed medical equipment.
Mm-hmm.
And I was kind of trying to get out of the bar business, and Molly came home. She was in real estate at the time. Your Aunt Molly was in real estate at the time, and she said, "Hey, I saw this bar for sale. It's on Packard, and what do you know about Cudahy?" And I'm like, "Well, I don't know a lot about Cudahy, but you know, I like the bar business and that area, and it's all the industrial buildings."
Mm-hmm.
So, and then we took a look at it, and then the rest is history. So that was 13 years ago.
Do you know any of the history of this bar before you owned it?
So this bar's been approximately 150 years old.
Hmm.
So if you go in the basement, there's still fieldstone is instead of brick, it's fieldstone all the way around. So it's approximately 150 years old. At the time that it was opened, it was Laddish over here, which is probably a quarter mile up the road, and then Osiris Erie, which was a ways down there, probably about a mile and a half down Packard, closer to Chicago south side. So, and this bar used to be a brothel and a tavern, and it was very small. So it was just the front bar was here, and everything else was either rooming houses or the owner lived here, or, you know. So, but 13 years ago we bought it, and we didn't look back. Now we have the upper unit as a Airbnb, and I think we have a great crowd, great group of regulars.
What makes a regular great at a bar in Milwaukee?
Well, the stories, kind of being able to sit around and talk like we talk, and you know, talk about anything. And we have a good group of people, and you know, everybody gets along. And it's great because you have a bunch of new people come in, and you know, some people come and go, and it's great. It's a great way of meeting people. So.
If we could circle back, did you say that before you bought the bar, you were trying to get out of the bar industry?
Yeah, yeah. And because I was really interested in what I was doing during the day, and fixing medical equipment, and so I kind of was thinking about just kind of taking a segueing out of the bar business.
Mm-hmm.
But when we found this, we were like, "Oh, this is great! It has a parking lot. Has a rental upstairs, and it's a big enough size, but not too big," which I always now wish it was a little bigger. But yeah, it was, you know, sometimes the bar business is tough too. So, you know, if you're there every day, you need to take a little break.
So what makes a good regular at the bar?
Actually, you know, regulars, you become friends with them.
Mm-hmm.
They enjoy your company, obviously, and vice versa. And they genuinely care about the tavern, the bar business. So that's always good.
Would you say that there's any skills that you need to be a good bar owner?
I always need to work on all my skills as being a bartender. Being attentive, it's always good. Everybody laughs because I have a little bit of ADD, so it's perfect for a bartender. So you can kind of juggle multiple conversations, multiple drinks. So, working well with other people is probably the biggest thing, and that's something that everybody struggles, you know, with, you know. some people that you don't get along with for one reason or another. They're still human, they're still people, and you have to be decent to people.
What would you say has been the biggest challenge you've faced while owning a bar?
Don't sweat the small stuff. It's really kind of the biggest thing.
Mm-hmm.
The bar business, when we were busy and people are waiting or something, don't let it get to you. We're not surgeons. We're not. This is something so small in comparison to what people do that have really tough jobs. So have fun with it, and don't let it get to you, because it's really small in comparison to what is going on in the world. So.
Do you have any of your own personal stories about owning a bar, like interesting experiences or?
Not so much in this bar, but funny stories that were like your mother told you don't ever do this, and somebody at the bar does it, and it goes wrong. I'll give you an example. Fella, I'm a big guy. I mean, I'm a little guy, but I'm a heavy guy. And somebody came, and I haven't seen him in a while, and he picked me up, and he kind of like jokingly, but he choked me out. And it was very funny because all of a sudden he let me go, and I fell right to the ground. and I was like, wow. And you finally get your bearings together and everything. And we laughed about it, but it was funny because I just remember like rough housing in the house, your parents telling you, hey, don't do that, and then something breaks or somebody passes out. So that was always funny. Just very funny stories that were people that have a great time and it's a way for adults to kind of let loose and hang out and tell stories, and there's a lot of great stories you hear, and a lot of fun times that you have here. Most of the stories that people that are here, we always laugh because everywhere else everybody talks about the story of what happened, all the time, but in the bar, the funny stories pretty much stay in the bar,
Yeah.
So.
What would you be able to tell us? Any of the things that people tell you?
Well, I mean, it's funny that Molly would say, I didn't know so-and-so were getting a divorce. And I would go, you didn't know that? How do you not know that? Or just funny stories like that. Or not funny stories, because divorce isn't really that funny. But the idea of people telling you a lot of stories that you think, holy cow, I'm not quite sure. I don't think you should be telling me this story. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
But it's all in good fun, and we as a bartender, we always take a vow of that story gets lost with the bartender. So that's always kind of funny. But there are some funny stories that you have to talk about for a while. But for the most part, it's people having fun and being able to do what they want to do without, obviously not doing anything that law breaking or anything, but, letting loose and having fun. So.
I guess without naming names, do you have any interesting regulars?
Yeah, I have very interesting regulars. I have a lot of interesting regulars, but unique regulars as far as they all have their own story. I have a gentleman, never told me up until just recently that he was in Vietnam for 3 tours, and I never knew that he was in the service. And he was a highly decorated soldier. And that was really kind of really? I didn't know that. And, kind of telling you things that he probably hasn't told anybody, and so that was really unique. And I have another friend of mine who was also a regular that was also in Vietnam, and he always talks about, now he's in his 70s, talks about like every day after Vietnam was a freebie. So like he was a child. He's a child. He still is. He still goes and buys crazy things. Like, why would you buy that? Well, I wanted to. But he feels that after he got back from Vietnam, he said that every day was a freebie. So, and he lived to that. He does live to that right now. So that's pretty neat, to listen to stories like that, and or women that talk about their kids and child labor, or not child labor, being in labor. Those are funny stories. After they have a couple drinks and they start talking like about their the stories that of them growing up is really neat. When I told some of my regulars about what was going on today, they were all like, you should really just have them interview all of us here at the bar. And I'm like, well, first, there's two reasons. One reason is that you guys couldn't drink while they were interviewing you, and they can't be in the bar like videotaping for a school project. Or maybe, who knows.
We'll see. What would you say is the biggest thing you've learned while owning a bar and talking to all these people?
Don't be, how do you say it? Like, don't be a woe is me person. Because no matter what, somebody has it worse than you ever even thought of. And something that I'm not very good at, I feel that every day of my life I get better. But being a person with empathy and actually caring about people, even if you don't have a lot of things in common with them. I think that is the biggest thing, that owning a bar, you the whole, don't sweat the small stuff, the whole being a kind person, all the time. And I think the three right here are pretty kind. You get it already at a young age, I think. I can see that already. And that's important.
Yeah.
So most people who come into your bar, they're from this area?
Yeah, for the most part, yeah. Most of them retired from either Laddish or Osiris Erie, which is over here, which is now Caterpillar, or there's a few other places in the area that were factories, or Patrick Cudahy. So.
And most of them are retired?
Yeah, most of them are retired. So our day crowd is mostly retirees, and then our night crowd is, more anywhere from 25 to 65. So.
Right. So the night crowd, where do they kind of work now?
All over. After COVID, I think a lot of people still work from home now. A lot of people work downtown because it is easier. If you're in Cudahy, if you live in Cudahy, it is so easy to get downtown. You go right over to Hone Bridge, and I'm sure you guys, that's how you got here, right? Was it Hone Bridge?
Yeah, how we got here.
Right. So, think about that. When going up the other way on the expressway to Fox Point or Whitefish Bay, is bumper to bumper.
Yeah.
Right? Yeah.
So kind of start rounding out, what would you say is the biggest change you've seen in Milwaukee throughout your life?
Industrial, the industrial movement of Milwaukee, all the industries that we had at one time, and now we have a handful. That's the biggest one that I see. But that's just times. It's not anything to do with what Milwaukee did wrong or right. It was more of the times. You know, manufacturing is not the big thing in the United States anymore. So,
How do you think that change impacted Milwaukee?
I think it was a big impact at one time, but I think now that you have so many other entities that kind of make up for it, and you have, like was it Northwestern Mutual Life Building and all the other people working for, I think they employ over 5,000 people, so, it's just like that change, so, it took a long time, but, it's a lot of people now are not doing manual labor, they're doing, IT, or it fills in with IT, and other different, job opportunities.
So throughout your life, what has made you choose to stay in Milwaukee instead of moving out to somewhere else?
I had an older daughter that went to St. Louis University, which is great, another small city. But it's in Milwaukee, it's so easy. As much as we complain about traffic, it's so easy to get around Milwaukee. Either by car, by bike, walking. It is very easy to get around Milwaukee, and we have a beautiful lake and the park system's unbelievable. When I was younger, we went to the parks all the time, and now that I'm older, I'm back going to the parks. From the lakefront to Seven Bridges to hike and bike, all over Milwaukee, there are some really great county parks.
What are some of your favorite parks?
Actually, the Seven Bridges and Grant Park to golf, Ornament right here, the golf. It's fantastic. I mean, it's reasonable, and I do like the lakefront, walking around the lakefront, even to this day, through the Summerfest area, all the way along the lakefront by Bradford, all the way up closer to your house. Doctors Park, those are all great parks right along the lake. So.
Yeah. Well, so we're wrapping up here. Is there anything else you want to include about your time in Milwaukee? Any interesting experiences or anything else throughout your life?
I thought about this for a while, but I think there's so many things that you could kind of talk about. Obviously, we just got done talking about the county parks and the lakefront, and it's one thing great about living in Milwaukee. You can drive for 40 minutes and you're out in the country. You can go to Lapham Peak or the Kettle Moraine trails, and it's pretty neat to be where you can go from the city life, and it's a small city, so it's like I said, it's easy to get around and everything else. But you can leave and go in 40 minutes. You're at Terry Andre Park or Lapham Peak. It's nice. An hour and a half to Chicago max. An hour to Madison. It's pretty easy to get around if you live in Milwaukee.
Okay. Well, we would like to thank you for doing this interview, and
Thank you.
Yeah.
Well, thank you. I appreciate it.